And then we get maybe the most bittersweet moment of the show. Chidi and Eleanor are sitting on their balcony overlooking the amazing view they have, essentially saying goodbye to each other. And eventually, Eleanor asks Chidi when he leaves, can he do it before she wakes up? Which, if you're Antonio and you don't have a heart, it probably didn't affect you. But I got pretty teared up.
Not gonna cry, is he?
Welcome back to another episode of The Rank. I'm John, and today we're going to be ranking the next and final episode of The Good Place. Now, for those of you who are new to the show, I'm just going to give you a bit of an agenda. We start with the potent notables, which are just some interesting facts or tidbits that I found out about the episode or series. Then I go into the episode overview, which is where I talk about everything that happened in the episode, which means there are spoilers ahead. And then The Rank, where I rank the episode in 5 categories on a scale of 1 to 5, 1 being the worst, 5 being the best, all to find out what are the best sitcoms of all time. And today we're ranking the 13th and final episode of The Good Place, titled Whenever You're Ready, written and directed by Michael Schur. All right, so let's find out how this one stacks up, starting with the potent notables.
Potent notables.
The final episode of The Good Place aired Thursday, January 30th, 2020, and the finale had the best viewership numbers that it had in a while, going from 2.121 million viewers last episode to 2.315 million viewers for this episode. And obviously it's the end of the series, but that means it's also the end of a season. So at the end of every season, I find out how it did as far as awards season is concerned. So for the Emmys, it had 5 nominations and 1 none. It was nominated for Best Writing for this episode, actually, but it lost to Schitt's Creek. Darcy Carden was nominated for Best Supporting Actress, but lost to Annie Murphy from Schitt's Creek. William Jackson Harper was nominated for Best Supporting Actor, but lost to Dan Levy from Schitt's Creek. Ted Danson was nominated for Best Lead Actor, but lost to Eugene Levy of Schitt's Creek. And I think you might see where this is headed, but it was nominated for Best Comedy and lost to Schitt's Creek. All right, so let's go to some other potent notables. Cast members were surprised at how often they were actually recognized when on location in Athens. Once, while dining in a restaurant, Darcy Carden was approached by a bartender who confidently said to her, "I am also not a girl or a robot." And next is a real Ron Swanson moment for our Parks and Rec fans out there. Tahani ends up taking woodworking lessons from Nick Offerman in the episode, building a chair which Offerman ultimately calls perfect. So because of Nick Offerman's extensive knowledge and woodworking skill, the producers actually let him pick the chair that they would use, and he picked an $85,000 chair. But it was discovered that the chair was located hundreds of miles away and couldn't get shipped in time. So the set directors brought in what they thought was a close and reasonable copy of it. So on the day of filming, Offerman took one look at the chair and called it garbage and said jokingly that his woodworking peers would make fun of him for praising such a chair on camera. On the show's podcast, Michael Schur explained his inspiration for the ending of this episode. So one day, while Michael Schur was checking his mail, he had something in his mailbox that wasn't for him. It was for somebody that was 2 streets away. And he was feeling tired and grumpy, so he wasn't going to do it. But then he thought about the fact that he's making a show about how people should treat each other better, and so he felt obligated to return it. So he walked a couple blocks to return the mail, and then on the way back, he ran into a neighbor he hadn't seen in a while who had just adopted a new puppy. So later, Schur reflected on the fact that if he had just thrown the letter away, then he would have missed out on an opportunity to play with a new puppy and chat with an old friend. And he said that often the reward for doing a good deed isn't fame or wealth or glory, but rather small and mundane things that make one's day a little bit brighter. So for the location of the final door, the showrunner selected a peaceful grove of 2,000-year-old giant redwood trees in the San Francisco Bay Area. As it turns out, a wedding had recently taken place in the area, and the woven branch archway used as the wedding altar had been left behind. So the set decorators cleaned it up, added a few leaves and stuff, and then used that as the final door. I just thought that was kind of nice. All right, but those are all the potent notables. Let's go to the episode overview. So we've reached the series finale of The Good Place. Kind of unbelievable that I actually made it all the way through one of these. Hopefully you all have enjoyed these episodes, for any of you following along. For me, it's been great watching it over again. And this episode is one of the best series finales ever.
Is it?
I know I'm giving away the rank early here, but I think it's safe to say, as anyone who's watched this series from beginning to end will attest. It interweaves touching moments with comedy masterfully, and even throws in a whole bunch of philosophy. It's just beautifully done. That being said, we open the episode with a familiar seeming scene with Michael saying that he's doing attempt 803. Now, if you recall the last attempt that he did of his bad place neighborhood. It was attempt 802. So I suppose for a second you could wonder, are they going to say all this was bullshit? That it was all just part of the punishment? But it would only be for a second, because pretty soon you see that he's holding a guitar, trying to learn how to play it and write a song. Now he's struggling to get these lyrics, but I feel like if he just maybe took some acid or something, he might get to where he wants to be with this one, judging by the lyrics he's got in there already. But Michael knows his song is shit, and he calls for Janet in frustration. And Janet offers him a magic guitar that can play music for him. She says it's the #1 request of men over 50. I think I would definitely be one of those guys, which is, I guess, kind of pathetic to say, but whatever, I want to know how to play. But the whole point here is that people want to learn stuff without the good place magic because it means more to do it yourself. So we get another new effect here, and that is that apparently everybody has these green doors that you can just walk through and get to the places that you want to go. These places are seemingly in other people's houses, by the way, which feels like an invasion of privacy, but whatever, I'll go with it. Michael and Janet are going to walk through the door, and they're going to end up in Chidi's place, where he's giving another philosophy lecture, but this time the lecture is about a book, and the author is there. Said author, who is actually the guy that they say he is in the show. Eleanor calls him a rando and says he should pay more attention to Chidi because Chidi knows and he doesn't. But the reason Michael and Janet have gone to Chidi's is to grab Chidi for a meeting of the Joint Council of Afterlife Affairs. The JCAA. So they have to go through another doorway, and that gets them into the interdimensional space where Jeff the doorman is, who still really loves frogs and has over 300 frog trinkets now, by the way. And at this meeting, we've got the judge, we've got Vicky, we've got Sean, so we got a lot of throwback people in here. And the judge says, I want to make this quick because I just started rewatching The Leftovers. She's super into pop culture. And we get a great joke here where she says that when she found out that Carrie Coon was never even nominated for her role here, she thought about erasing 2% of the Earth's population, which, for those of you who don't know, is the conceptual premise of The Leftovers, that, 2% of the world's population, I think it's 1 or 2%, I can't even remember, of the world's population is erased mysteriously. But Michael's going over the people that just made it to the good place, and he's going to highlight a few notable people, like Roberto Clemente and St. Thomas Aquinas, which makes Chidi loudly go, yes! Which I thought was funny, because, he's a philosopher. But essentially, it seems like this new system is working. But apparently there's a glut of good place architects with so many people making it there. And Vicky's basically in charge of the Good Place Architects, and she's kind of upset. She doesn't like how the young demons treat acting. And I have to say that Vicky's meta stance on acting and the art of acting is just always fun to me. It's very goofy. But the best part of this whole thing for me was when Sean, who's, notoriously grumpy, is told by Michael, hey, just admit it. This is actually working. And he goes, I will never, ever, 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 ever. And I won't say ever as many times as he did, but the amount of times he said it made it funny. I think it was the 5th ever that broke me. After this, though, we're going to get a sense of how they plan on ending the series. We see Jason play the perfect game of Madden next to his dad, and they're both on the field at a football stadium, and the stadium is packed with people cheering him on for this Madden game. He gets this weird sort of happy look on his face, and then the next scene we see, he's with Janet, and he's telling Janet, he's basically saying, I did something special, and I cooked spaghetti for you. And the spaghetti is just a plastic brick of spaghetti. I don't even know how one could do this. But I did enjoy that Jason didn't pretend like he did a good job. He was like, it was terrible, and I tried it, and it's terrible. But Janet, who's seeing all these attempts at doing nice things that Jason's doing, and she realizes something, she's like, oh dip. Which did make me laugh because, it's Janet saying oh dip. But what she realizes is that Jason no longer needs to be in the good place. He decides he's going to throw a going away party, and when he gets everybody together and tells them they all look sad, and he knows they look sad because, as he says, they looked the way his teachers did anytime he raised his hand, which is just another classic Jason is stupid joke. But lucky for him, most of his old dance crew made it to the good place at some point, and they throw a kind of rager and put on a dance exposition. And I actually found it really sweet that everybody that was viewing it was super into it. Now, this whole episode has a whole bunch of callbacks and references to earlier points in the series, and we get a few of these at the party as well. One of which is Doug Forsett being at the party as his younger self and eating a ton of chicken. We already saw Jason's dad, but we get to see him again, and then we see Pillboy. And both Pillboy and Jason's dad are giving Jason eulogies, basically. So Jason's dad's eulogy was, I think, meant to be the funny one, but it was actually Pillboy's that got me because he tells Jason that Jason's his Gardner Minshew. Now, if you're not a football fan like my editor and producer Antonio, you probably don't know who that is, so just so you know, that was a former Jacksonville Jaguars quarterback. And he's a very goofy-looking guy who always had like a mustache. So, it's funny.
Nah, not really.
Now, before the party's over, Jason is going to show Eleanor and Chidi a necklace that he made for Janet so that Janet will never forget him. Of course, Eleanor and Chidi are super sweet, and they're like, oh, she'll never forget you. And Chidi's like, I mean, she really can't. She remembers everything about the universe, right? But Janet walks with him to the doorway to the end of existence for him. And as we get there, he goes to give her the necklace and realizes he lost it. Janet naturally reassures him and tells him that she'll never forget him. And then she leaves him there to walk through the doorway on his own. So now we have one member of Team Cockroach down. So next up is Tahani. We're going to cut to her, and she's making a chair, as I mentioned in the Pote Notables. She's getting woodworking lessons from Nick Offerman and has apparently put together the perfect chair. She's been keeping a list of things that she wants to learn how to do, and becoming a master woodworker was one of them. Now, I don't know about the rest of you, but I paused it to do like a quick read through of the list, and I'm curious, you can comment down below which ones were your favorites. Mine was beating NBA Jam on All-Star. I don't know why, probably because it seems so out of character for Tahani to want to figure out how to beat NBA Jam on All-Star mode. It did make me think, though, maybe she played it with Jason when they were dating back in, the last iteration or whatever it was. Either way, it's clear that Tahani is going to be the next member to go. But right after looking at this list, the audience is led to think, okay, this is what Tahani has left. Once she finishes this list, she's going to be done, right? But then Janet's like, hey, the thing that you told me to tell you if it ever happened, it just happened. What was the thing? Well, as we see the exposition of Tahani talking to Camilla, who's back, we find out that it's that her parents made it to the good place. And both Camilla and Tahani are all kind of worried. They're like, what are our parents going to be like? I mean, they should be better, right? But how much better are they really going to be? And when they show up, the parents just basically go up and hug them and tell them how much they love them. And they just say that they're going to be forever sorry. It's a really nice moment, but it's actually the renewed, loving relationship with her parents that convinces Tahani that she's ready to go. I mean, she still does a bunch of stuff on her list. I think she does the whole list. And then when she tells everyone, Janet's like, oh, should I set up a party for you? And of course, Tahani's like, no, I already cooked everything. I got it all set up. I made all the furniture. I painted the house. I also trained the animals. And right after that, a panda walks up and then asks Eleanor if she'd like some more champagne. Plus, she's already said goodbye to her parents and Camilla and a few other people. And then she says that B&J took it really bad. I don't know who that is. So somebody's got to help me out here. Who are B&J? Benny and June? Bob and Joan? I didn't look it up, so I'm sort of counting on you guys to put it in the comments and let me know. So please do. And after the party's over, we get a moment between Tahani and Eleanor. And in this moment, Tahani talks about Eleanor's rockin' bod. And it's a fun callback to all the times that Eleanor has done that to Tahani. And then the list pops up, and we see that one of the items on the list is problematically objectify Eleanor. So this was really funny and well done, but it was touching as well. And as Tahani is saying her goodbyes to everybody, she gives compliments to everyone, right? And she tells Michael that he's the best architect in existence. But this compliment causes an epiphany, and she realizes, I don't want to go. And so everybody's like, great, it's a party for you staying here. And then she's like, no, I do want to leave the good place, but I don't want to leave existence. She wants to learn to become an architect like Michael. Her decision here brings us back through the door between dimensions, and we see Jeff, who's seemingly getting a little sick of the frog tchotchkes. But we also get an excellent bit where we see Brent on a TV screen, and he's saying, I can never tell a woman to smile. What if telling her to smile actually makes her look prettier? Aren't I helping her then? Now, this did get me, and I love that he still hasn't made it to the good place. That's just fantastic stuff to me. So Tahani makes it into the room, the architect room or whatever, and she's talking to Glenn, and she's like, I'm going to start from the bottom. First thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to start getting you guys antimatter. Cups of antimatter, which I don't know why, but I really enjoy the idea that these beings are drinking antimatter. Now, we do get a few Tahani name drops during her scene. One was Oscar de la Renta, who's apparently a Dominican fashion designer and had meals with Tahani's parents. The other is that Frank Gehry, who was, when I wrote this, he is, and then literally later that day, he passed away, and I got notified on my phone, which I just thought was kind of a crazy coincidence. Anyway, he was a well-regarded architect and was also her godfather, which is like her second or third one of those. But we end this little meeting here of architects with a fun little joke where Michael's like, someday I want to name drop you. And then Tahani says, well, name dropping's a little gauche, Michael. It's good stuff. But now we're going to get to the meat. Eleanor and Chidi. So buckle up for an emotional ending. We open their beginning of the end scenes with Eleanor finishing some philosophy book that ends with the sentence, working out the terms of moral justification is an unending task. And she makes a joke of reading his book was an unending task, which, that's cute. But then it's revealed that Chidi is also reading a book. He's reading the Da Vinci Code, which he calls a garbage book. And then he asks Eleanor if he'd be a good symbologist if that were a real job. And in case you don't know the reference, the Da Vinci Code was a book by Dan Brown about a character named Robert Langdon who's a Harvard symbologist. Hence the joke. Chidi seems like he's in such a content place in his life. And we sort of know that contentment usually means they're ready to go, right? So we see Eleanor and Chidi having dinner with Chidi's friend Uzo and Eleanor's terrible roommates from her flashbacks. Somehow her roommates made it, which is surprising. We also learn through some exposition that Eleanor's mom is there, as well as Chidi's parents, and that they've met each other. And during this conversation, Chidi is going to randomly mention that Shakespeare actually went through the door, and Eleanor's like, good, because the plays he was writing up here were pretty damn bad. Did you see Tempest 2? Here We Blow Again? Woof. I don't know, Shakespeare jokes get me, I guess. But Chidi's peaceful countenance throughout the meal makes it clear to the audience and then shortly after to Eleanor that he's done with the good place. What will Eleanor do though? Well, she's going to try to convince Chidi to stay. First, she brings him to Greece, and then she brings him to Paris because she's trying to convince him that the good times can last forever. But alas, Chidi still ends up telling her that he's actually stayed beyond the time that he knew he was ready. He tells Eleanor that the moment that he knew he was ready was when his mom kissed Eleanor on the cheek, and then Eleanor's mom wiped the lipstick off. And I don't know what it is about that, but I just found that incredibly touching. But Eleanor isn't ready, and she starts crying. And she's like, I've been alone my whole life, and I used to tell myself that being alone was good and what I wanted, and now I know that's not true. I don't want to be alone anymore. So I mean, just like an intense amount of guilt, which Chidi succumbs to, and I would have too. But to Eleanor's credit, it doesn't take her too long to realize that she's actually being pretty selfish. And then we get maybe the most bittersweet moment of the show. Chidi and Eleanor are sitting on their balcony overlooking the amazing view they have, essentially saying goodbye to each other. And eventually, Eleanor asks Chidi, when he leaves, can he do it before she wakes up? Which, if you're Antonio and you don't have a heart, it probably didn't affect you. But I got pretty teared up.
Not gonna cry, is he?
And when she wakes up, it's to a Chidi calendar on the bed next to her, instead of Chidi himself, which was cute, but damn, it was sad. So Chidi goes with Janet to the doorway, and once Chidi goes, out pops Jason. He's still there. He went looking for the necklace, and when he found it, he's been sitting there waiting for the right Janet to come along before he goes. Apparently, he's been waiting for 1,000 Baramies, which, I don't know how many years that is, but I think it's probably a lot. He says it was fine because he was just sort of zen about it. He would listen to the river and basically be one with nature. And Janet's like, oh, like a monk. And the reference itself didn't make me laugh, but the fact that Jason did not get the reference to him being Jianyu at all, that's what made me laugh. Just one last Jason's dumb joke before he's gone forever. But to wrap things up, we gotta find out how Eleanor's gonna leave. What's gonna be the thing that gives her the reason to leave? She can't figure it out herself. She comes up with helping Mindy St. Clair, who she sees as a kindred spirit. So once again, we get another callback, another person coming back from an old episode. And we find out that apparently Mindy, to this point, has refused to join the new system. So she's still in her house in the medium place. And I just have to ask, how has her brain not turned to mush like the Good Place people did? Like, there's no fear of death for her either, so why? For that matter, how have the people in the Bad Place not had their minds become mush as well? Anyway, the reason that Eleanor sees Mindy as a kindred spirit is because Mindy's a lone wolf who knows what she wants. And then at the same time, they say, cocaine and self-pleasure. She does love cocaine. But Eleanor is able to convince Mindy to be a part of the system, and by doing so, she brings Mindy to like the architect place, and we get to see Tahani again. And then we get a string of jokes that really worked for me. First was when Tahani sees Mindy, she says, Mindy Sinclair, as I don't live and breathe. Saying it makes it doesn't sound good, but I liked it.
Riveting.
Then Tahani's gonna be like, oh yeah, I'll design the tests for Mindy. And Eleanor's like, oh, are you certified now? And then Sean shows up and he's like, she's gonna be certified real soon. It's all menacing. He just like cannot say it without being menacing. Just old habits, I guess. And finally, after Mindy finishes thanking Eleanor for all that Eleanor's doing for her, she says, I'm real glad I taped you having sex. I mean, just a really fun scene and kind of necessary after all the heavy Chidi stuff. Well, Eleanor thinks this is going to do the trick, that she'll be ready to leave now, but alas, she isn't. However, while she was helping Mindy, Michael finds out that the Joint Council of Afterlife Affairs has officially disbanded because everything's working. This, of course, sends Michael into an existential crisis, as he seems to do every episode this season. So he's going to try to go through the door, but it doesn't work for him, which Michael thinks is unfair. And you know what? I'm kind of with him on this one. Why can't he end his own existence? Seems like it would make sense for him to be able to do this. This ends up leading to Eleanor getting a bright idea. But the show is going to sort of cryptically not tell us what the idea is. She's going to go to the judge, and then the judge is all against it at first, right? But becomes convinced when Eleanor says, if you do this, you'll never have to see any of them again. And the judge is like, that sounds pretty good because y'all are annoying. You know, you saved the universe and everything, but it's your tone. But what was the idea? Well, it was for Michael to become human. And when Eleanor brings this idea to Michael, Michael's obviously very moved by it. But she warns him, she's like, Michael, when you die, it may not be the same up here. You know, Sean may have staged a coup. Anything could have happened, you never know. And Michael's like, what's more human than not knowing what will happen after you die? And then he says, well, I guess texting that you're 5 minutes away when you haven't actually even left yet is more human. So when Michael goes back to Earth, he has to go to the interdimensional space again, and he's got to go buy Jeff the doorman, right? And Michael does something really nice for Jeff. He gives him a real frog. And Jeff is back to being excited about frogs again, which is adorable. I don't know how he's the first person to give Jeff an actual frog. I mean, how many thousands of Baramies has he been into frogs and nobody's given him anything but tchotchkes? The other interesting thing about this is that Janet seems more broken up about Michael leaving than Jason. I mean, she's really sad. But the next thing you know, Michael's gone through the door, he gets to Earth and he says, man, it's hot. And then he sort of smiles and says, but it's a dry heat. And I loved this little moment of humanity that they give him. But helping Michael made Eleanor's journey finally feel complete. She sits with Janet at the doorway, and then Janet sort of wonders about Michael and what he's doing. And it's kind of silly because can't she be everything that's happening everywhere? But that's okay. It's a nice moment, and Eleanor is sort of describing what Michael's life is likely like. And as she's describing it, we're seeing what Michael's life is actually like. And he's got a dog named Jason, which is fun. And then we see him get a text from somebody asking if he's already at the bar that he said he was going to be at. And he texts back, I'm 5 minutes away, which is a great callback to only a few moments earlier. And we see that he's learning to play guitar, and the person he's learning to play with is Ted Danson's real-life wife, which is a lot of fun. Basically, it's just showing that he's living a normal life. For him, it's a joy to experience the world in a way that we only get memories of. Like, wouldn't it be nice to see the world through the eyes of childhood innocence that we once had? To be fascinated by mundane things? To see the wonder of what the world has to offer? Sounds kind of nice. But we're going to head back to Eleanor, who's still sitting on the bench with Janet. And Janet's like, can I stay with you? And Eleanor says only if she says the thing that she taught her to say, which was apparently, I hate to see you go through the final door of existence, but I love to watch you leave. How very fitting for Eleanor. And in an episode of touching moments, you'd think this would be the final one, but we get one more. As Eleanor walks through the door, she breaks up into cosmic dust. And we see this dust end up landing on some random guy. This guy who's just thrown mail in the trash. And when it does land on him, he suddenly changes his mind, reaches into the trash, grabs the mail, and decides he's going to bring it to the person it was supposed to go to. Of course, the apartment he brings it to is Michael's. And it seems that Michael recognizes his friend Eleanor, and he says to her, take it sleazy, which is a really cute callback. It's a sweet moment because for whatever reason, this gave a little bit of brightness to this guy's day. And that's how we end the episode. Kind of feels like Michael Schur was saying, I hope I gave just a little bit brighter of a day to everybody who watched it. And I like that. So let's find out how it ranked.
Oh, wait.
So the rank is where I rank the episode based on 5 categories: story, acting, dialogue, episode coherence, and character relatability. I rank it on a scale of 1 to 5, 1 being the worst, 5 being the best. And then I have a laugh counter where I tally up the amount of times the episode made me laugh out loud. 1 point per laugh out loud gets added to the score. And before I get started, I just want to say if you enjoyed this episode, please leave a like down below. It really does help me out. But without further ado, the first category is story. And this is an excellent story. You know what? I'm just going to say it. I gave every single category a 5 here. here. I love this episode. I love this series. This was beautiful. There you go.
That's a wrap, everybody.
So we got a story all about how Team Cockroach sort of ends for us. A series finale that gives some finality to it, which is sometimes uncommon and hard to do on a regular sitcom because, people aren't all just going to die. But in this case, they're all already dead. So there's able to be a finality to this that you don't normally get, and it's just incredibly touching and well done. So let's go to acting, which I thought everyone was excellent, as they always are. It almost feels criminal that nobody won an acting Emmy for this. I don't understand it. So let's go to dialogue. This is a tough episode, right? Because you got a lot of touching moments. There's a lot of emotion with it. You're losing a lot of characters. People are basically, essentially dying. They're ending existence. And yet, it's a sitcom, so you got to be funny, right? And I feel like it straddled the line perfectly. So that brings us to episode coherence. And here's the thing. There might have been a few things that I mentioned. Like, for instance, Janet saying she wonders what Michael's doing when she historically has been able to just see what everybody's doing all the time on Earth. And the idea that, like, the Dance Dance Resolution people all made it and Eleanor's terrible roommates made it. Those are the kind of things that are like, whatever. I could quibble and go less than a 5, but I'm not gonna. And then we go to character relatability. Following these characters along for 4 seasons here, I don't know how you could relate to characters more, really. I mean, really the only person that is less relatable than the rest is Jason. And in this episode, I find him to be very relatable. He's the first one who realizes that he doesn't need to be there anymore. He gives us the explanation of what it feels like, of this feeling of calmness. I thought it was excellent. Now, historically, when I've done hour-long episodes, I've cut the laugh counter in half because it seems a little unfair to have a laugh counter tallied up that gives, an hour's worth of laughs as opposed to 30 minutes worth. I don't think I'm going to do it for this one because I want this to be the highest ranked episode of The Good Place because I believe it's that good.
You rigged this whole thing.
Rigged!
So my laugh counter was 29. So this puts the episode total at a 54, which makes it a meaning of life. It puts the series average at a 38, which means it's in the Holy Grail. And being that it's the first sitcom that I've officially finished with the rank, it is, as of right now, the best sitcom of all time. So thanks for listening and or watching. Check out the other Good Place episodes or any of my other movie or sitcom rankings. Remember to subscribe, comment, and like. You can email me at john@therankpodcast.com, or you can support the show by becoming a patron at patreon.com/therankpodcast. But for now, it's time to put a forking fork in it. Good Place is done.
Thank God that's over.
Yeah.
So this final episode of The Good Place aired Thursday, January 30th, 2012. Nope, it's 2020.
Cut!
The final episode of The Good Place aired January 30th.
Cut!
The final episode of The Good Place aired...
Cut!
Take 3.
You'd think I could just remember it from there to there, but I can't.
1 hour later.
The final episode of The Good Place, I can't do it. Can't do it.
3 hours later.
Can you move it along? I'm all out of time cards.
The final episode of The Good Place aired Thursday. Oh my God.
We're gonna be here a while.